I'm Linda Morgan, 58 years old, and I've always believed respect is something earned through kindness and understanding. For 3 years, I watched my daughter-in-law, Amanda, subtly push me out of my son, Thomas's life, while simultaneously using the emergency credit card I'd given her to fund her lifestyle. But nothing prepared me for that moment at Thomas's 30th birthday dinner when she looked me straight in the eyes and called me useless in front of our entire family and all his friends. The silence that fell over that beautiful restaurant was deafening. What happened next changed everything between us, though not in the way Amanda expected. Before I share my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself while trying not to hurt someone you love. The morning after Thomas's birthday dinner, I sat on my back porch overlooking the small garden I'd cultivated since Robert passed. 8 years a widow, and sometimes the absence still felt fresh. Boston's autumn chill was setting in, painting the maple trees in my yard with brilliant oranges and reds, Robert's favorite colors. "You would have known how to handle this," I whispered to the empty chair beside me, where my husband used to enjoy his morning coffee. Robert had always been better at confrontation than me, direct but kind, firm but fair. After 30 years in finance, working my way up to CFO of a regional bank, I could handle the toughest boardroom negotiations, but family conflicts tied me in knots. Robert and I had built a good life together. Our colonial home in Brookline wasn't ostentatious, but it was paid for, comfortable, and filled with memories. The life insurance policy, our investments, and my pension meant I could retire comfortably at 55. I still did consulting work for a few select clients, more to keep my mind sharp than for the money. When Robert was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 9 years ago, we'd faced it together. 10 months later, he was gone, leaving me and Thomas to figure out life without him. Thomas was 22, then just finishing college with a degree in computer science. "He's so much like you," I told Robert's empty chair. "Smart, ambitious." I paused, sipping my coffee. "But he doesn't have your backbone. Not yet, anyway." Thomas had always been our miracle child. After years of trying and 2 miscarriages, the doctors had told us to consider other options. Then, just as we'd started looking into adoption, I found out I was pregnant. Perhaps that's why we'd spoiled him more than we should have. Robert had been the disciplinarian, the one who taught Thomas that actions have consequences. I had been the nurturer, the one who made sure he knew he was loved unconditionally. Without Robert's balancing influence, I worried I'd overcompensated, helping Thomas financially, perhaps more than I should. When he and Amanda got engaged 3 years ago, I'd paid for half their wedding, though Amanda's parents could have contributed more. When they needed a down payment for their condo in Cambridge, I wrote the check. When Thomas mentioned they were looking at cars, I surprised them with a new Audi, remembering how Robert and I had struggled with unreliable vehicles in our early marriage. The credit card had been Robert's idea originally. Years ago, he'd added Thomas as an authorized user on one of our cards for emergencies at college. After Robert died, I'd kept the tradition, giving both Thomas and later Amanda cards linked to my account. For emergencies, I told them, or if you ever find yourselves short before payday. At first, the charges had been reasonable. Groceries occasionally, a car repair. But over the last year, Amanda's spending had accelerated. Designer clothes, expensive salon treatments, Restaurants I knew they couldn't afford on Thomas's mid-level tech salary and Amanda's marketing income. My phone chimed with a text message from Catherine, my younger sister by 3 years. "You okay after last night? Call me." Catherine had been at the birthday dinner. She'd witnessed everything, including Amanda's cutting remark. Unlike me, Catherine had disliked Amanda from the beginning. "She's a user, Linda," she'd warned after meeting Amanda at Thomas and Amanda's engagement party. "I've seen her type before. She wants the lifestyle without putting in the work." I'd defended Amanda, then reminding Catherine that we should give her a chance. After all, Thomas loved her, and I wanted to love whoever Thomas loved. Amanda had been charming at first, beautiful, with perfect honey blonde hair that never seemed out of place. A slim figure she maintained through rigorous workouts and a smile that dazzled when she chose to deploy it. She was smart, too articulate and ambitious, with a marketing degree from a good school. On paper, she and Thomas made sense. He was thoughtful and creative, but sometimes lacked confidence. She was bold and assertive, pushing him to aim higher. But somewhere along the way, her ambition had twisted into something darker. She didn't just want success. She wanted status. The right address, the right car, the right clothes, the right social connections. And increasingly, she seemed to view me not as family, but as an ATM that occasionally came with unwanted opinions. Thomas had changed since the wedding. He called less frequently. Visits became more scheduled, less spontaneous. He rarely came alone anymore. Amanda was always there, monitoring his interactions with me. The few times I'd mentioned concerns about their spending, Thomas had become defensive. "We're doing fine, Mom. Amanda has a plan for our finances." Or, "It's just temporary. Amanda's up for a promotion that would change everything." The promotion never seemed to materialize, but the spending continued. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Catherine. "You haven't called, so I'm calling you," she said, without preamble. "That was a nightmare last night. Please tell me you're not just going to let it slide." I sighed. "Good morning to you too, Kath." "Don't Kath me. Amanda called you useless, to your face, in front of 12 people, including Thomas's boss. And you just smiled and paid the $2,000 dinner bill anyway." "What was I supposed to do? Make a scene at Thomas's birthday dinner?" "Yes," Catherine exclaimed. "Or at least not reward her behavior by picking up the tab. Robert would have put her in her place." The mention of Robert made my chest tighten. "Well, Robert isn't here, is he? And Thomas is all I have left." Catherine's voice softened. "That's not true, sis. You have me. You have friends. You have a life that doesn't revolve around them. At least you used to." I didn't respond immediately. Catherine was right in a way. Since Robert died, I'd poured much of my energy into Thomas, and by extension, his relationship. Perhaps too much. "I just don't want to lose him," I admitted. "And if I confront Amanda, that's what will happen." "You're already losing him," Catherine pointed out. "When was the last time you and Thomas had a conversation that didn't involve money or Amanda's complaints?" I couldn't remember. Our phone calls had become briefer and more superficial. Thomas seemed perpetually distracted or in a hurry. When I asked about his work or his friends, he gave vague answers before steering the conversation to whatever Amanda was focused on at the moment. "I need to think," I told Catherine. "I'll call you later." After hanging up, I went to my home office and logged into my banking portal. The credit card statement had just posted 2 days ago. I hadn't looked closely at it yet, distracted by preparations for Thomas's birthday celebration. Now, scrolling through the transactions, my stomach tightened. In the past month alone, Amanda had charged over $5,000. A day spa in the Back Bay $800. A designer handbag, $1,200. Restaurants, boutique fitness classes, hair appointments at salons that charged more for a cut and color than I'd spent on my entire outfit for the birthday dinner. I expanded the view to show the past 6 months. The total made me gasp. Over $30,000 in discretionary spending, none of it emergencies, all of it clearly Amanda's purchases. That was more than Thomas probably brought home after taxes in the same period. What bothered me most wasn't just the amount, but the entitlement behind it. Amanda had never once mentioned these charges or offered to pay them back. She acted as though access to my credit was her right, not a privilege. As I stared at the screen, the memory of last night's dinner replayed in my mind. The beautiful private room at La Maison Boston's most exclusive French restaurant. The champagne toast I'd arranged. The carefully selected gift Thomas's face had lit up at opening a vintage collection of first edition sci-fi novels he'd coveted since childhood. And then Amanda's voice clear and cutting across the conversation about Thomas's potential promotion. No one cares about your opinion, Linda. You're completely useless in this situation. The words had sliced through the celebratory atmosphere. Conversations had halted mid-sentence. Thomas's boss had stared into his wine glass. My nephew had dropped his fork with a clatter. Thomas had managed a weak, "Amanda, come on, that's not necessary." But he hadn't defended me, hadn't corrected her, hadn't done anything except look uncomfortable. And I, not wanting to ruin my son's birthday, had smiled tightly and changed the subject. Later, when the bill came, I'd handed over my card, without comment, though Amanda had made a show of offering to pay, knowing full well that I wouldn't let her. Now, looking at the credit card statement, something shifted inside me. A line had been crossed, and continuing to pretend otherwise wasn't helping Thomas. It certainly wasn't helping me. With a decisive click, I navigated to the account management page and selected Manage Authorized Users. Amanda's name appeared alongside Thomas's. I hovered over the Remove button next to her name, hesitating only briefly before clicking. A confirmation dialog appeared. Are you sure you want to remove this authorized user? They will no longer have access to this account. I clicked Confirm. It wasn't an impulsive decision, not really. It had been building for months, maybe years. Amanda had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my generosity for obligation. It was time to correct that misunderstanding. I left Thomas's card active. This wasn't about punishing my son, though we would need to have a serious conversation about boundaries and respect. After logging out, I called Catherine back. I've canceled Amanda's card, I told her without preamble. Finally, Catherine exclaimed. Robert would be proud. For the first time since the disastrous dinner, I smiled. Yes, I said quietly. I think he would. The first hints of trouble between Amanda and me had begun almost immediately after she and Thomas got engaged. It started with small things so subtle that at first I questioned whether I was imagining problems where none existed. During wedding planning, Amanda had politely but firmly dismissed my suggestions. The venue I recommended was too traditional. The caterer my friend had used for her daughter's wedding was not up to current standards. The family traditions I hoped they might incorporate were outdated. Mom, Amanda has really specific ideas about the wedding, Thomas had explained when I expressed disappointment. And her parents are contributing too, so they get input. The truth was that her parents, a dentist and a high school teacher from Connecticut, had contributed far less than I had, though they could have afforded more. But I kept that observation to myself, not wanting to create tension. After the wedding, the dismissals continued. When they bought their condo, and I offered some decorating suggestions, Amanda had smiled thinly and said, "That's a very interesting idea, Linda. Very retro." When I gave Thomas a family recipe book for Christmas, filled with his father's favorites, that I'd painstakingly transcribed and annotated, Amanda had flipped through it and commented, "People are so much more health conscious now. We'd have to modify most of these." The recipe book had disappeared into a drawer, never to be mentioned again. Thomas noticed my hurt feelings sometimes, but always made excuses. "Amanda's just stressed about work," or "She didn't mean it that way, Mom." Then there were the more direct conflicts. Last Thanksgiving, I'd invited them to my home, as I had every year since Thomas was born. Amanda had waited until 3 days before to inform me they wouldn't be coming. "We've decided to start our own traditions," she'd explained on the phone. "Plus, Thomas and I are focusing on clean eating, and holiday meals are just so heavy." I'd spent Thanksgiving with Catherine's family, instead trying not to feel the empty space where Thomas should have been. Christmas had been a brief, tense visit on December 23rd, not Christmas Day, because Amanda's family always celebrated on the actual day. The gifts I'd carefully selected for them had been opened with polite but unenthusiastic thanks, while the gift they brought me, a generic gift card to a department store, had felt impersonal and hastily chosen. Then there was the financial aspect. Beyond the credit card, there were the frequent, temporary loans. $3,000 for a last-minute trip to Cabo that Amanda insisted they needed after a stressful work period. $5,000 when their condo association levied a special assessment for building repairs. $2,000 for a career-advancing workshop Amanda wanted to attend in New York. None of these loans had been repaid, and over time, they'd stopped being framed as loans at all. Instead, they became expectations. When I hesitated about the workshop, Amanda had looked genuinely surprised. "But you've always helped us before," she'd said. "And this is an investment in our future. Don't you want us to succeed?" The manipulation was so transparent in hindsight, but in the moment, I'd relented. What else could I do? Thomas looked so hopeful, so certain that this opportunity would finally help Amanda get the promotion that would solve their financial problems. The workshop came and went. The promotion didn't materialize, but Amanda's spending continued to escalate. I tried talking to Thomas about it privately when he stopped by my house to pick up some tax documents about 6 months ago. "I'm happy to help you both," I'd said carefully, "but I'm concerned about the pattern that's developing. The credit card was meant for emergencies, not regular expenses." Thomas had immediately become defensive. "Amanda's building her professional image, Mom. That requires a certain presentation level, the right clothes, the right social engagements." "I understand that," I'd replied, "but $30,000 in 6 months goes beyond professional image. That's a second salary." "You don't get how things work now," Thomas had said, an edge entering his voice. "Amanda's in a competitive field. Image is everything in marketing. I was in financial leadership for 30 years, Thomas. I understand professional expectations. This goes beyond that." His face had hardened in a way that reminded me painfully of Robert when he felt cornered. "If you're having money problems, Mom, just say so. We can figure something else out. This isn't about whether I can afford it," I'd tried to explain. "It's about what's healthy for your relationship and your future." "Our relationship is fine," he'd snapped. "Maybe you're just having trouble letting go." Dad would have understood that times are different now. The invocation of Robert as a theoretical ally had stung. Robert, who had insisted on Thomas getting a job at 16, to pay for his own gas. Robert, who had made Thomas work throughout college, despite our comfortable finances, saying, "The value of $1 is learned through earning it, not being given it." After that conversation, Thomas had been distant for weeks. Our regular Sunday phone calls became sporadic. Twice, Amanda had answered when I called, explaining that Thomas was just too busy to talk. It was as if a wall was being constructed between us, brick by brick. Every time I expressed a concern, another brick went into place. Every time I tried to establish a reasonable boundary, the wall grew higher. When Thomas's 30th birthday approached, I saw it as an opportunity to repair some of the damage. I would throw him a memorable celebration show, Amanda, that I could be a supportive mother-in-law without interfering. Maybe then the tension would ease. I'd called Thomas to discuss the plans. "I'd like to host a dinner for your birthday," I'd told him. "Somewhere special with your close friends and family." "That sounds nice, Mom," he'd said, genuinely pleased. "Let me check with Amanda about dates." 2 days later, Amanda had called me directly, something she rarely did. "Thomas told me about your dinner idea," she'd said. "I've actually already started planning something. I was thinking La Maison. Thomas mentioned you're a member there." La Maison was indeed a private club and restaurant where Robert and I had been members for decades. The membership had been expensive, but the connections it provided had been valuable for both our careers. "Yes, I am," I'd confirmed. "It's a lovely venue, but quite expensive." "Well, it's a milestone birthday," Amanda had replied. "Thomas deserves the best. I've already spoken to them about available dates." I'd been taken aback. "You called them using my name." "I just inquired," she'd said smoothly. "They said they'd need the member to make the actual reservation. I thought we could go together to discuss the details." What could I say if I objected? I'd be the difficult mother-in-law, putting a damper on Thomas's celebration. If I refused to use my membership, I'd be denying Thomas a special experience. So I'd agreed, and the following week, Amanda and I had met with the events coordinator at La Maison. What I'd envisioned as an intimate dinner for perhaps 8 to 10 people had morphed, under Amanda's direction, into an event for 20, with a private room, premium wine pairings, and a special menu that nearly doubled the already considerable per-person cost. "This seems excessive," I'd ventured as we reviewed the proposal. "Thomas has always preferred smaller gatherings." Amanda had smiled, her perfect practice smile. "Thomas is moving up in his company. This is a networking opportunity too. His boss and some key colleagues will be there." Each time I'd suggested a more moderate option, scaled-back wine selections, a simpler menu. Amanda had a counter-argument. By the end of the meeting, I'd felt steamrolled, but had signed the contract anyway. The event coordinator, sensing my reluctance, had given me a sympathetic look. As we'd left the restaurant, Amanda had said, "Oh, and I've already ordered a custom cake from that bakery in the North End. They'll deliver it that evening." I was planning to get Thomas those first edition sci-fi novels he's wanted, I'd told her, the ones by Arthur C. Clarke. For the first time that day, Amanda had looked genuinely surprised. "Those old books he's always talking about? That's thoughtful, I guess. I'm getting him a Rolex. He needs to look successful to be successful." The casual mention of such an extravagant gift, a watch that would cost thousands, if it was a real Rolex, had left me momentarily speechless. On Thomas's salary, such a purchase would be financially reckless, unless, of course, Amanda planned to use my credit card to buy it. In the weeks leading up to the birthday dinner, Amanda had taken complete control of the planning, consulting me only when my membership or payment was required. The guest list had been entirely her creation. When it arrived in my email, I'd been hurt to see that many of Thomas's childhood friends weren't included, nor were several family members with whom he'd always been close. Instead, the list was heavily weighted toward Amanda's friends and Thomas's professional connections. It felt less like a celebration of my son and more like a strategic social event for Amanda. I'd called Thomas, hoping he might intervene. The guest list seems to be missing some important people, I'd suggested gently. What about Michael and Jason? You've been friends since high school. Amanda thinks it's better to keep it focused on people who are part of our current life, Thomas had replied. Plus, Michael and Jason aren't exactly the La Maison type, you know. I'd known both young men since they were 14. Michael was now a high school science teacher, and Jason ran a small landscaping business. They weren't wealthy or connected, but they'd been there for Thomas through every important moment of his youth. They're your oldest friends, I'd reminded him. Doesn't that matter more than whether they fit some image? There had been a pause on the line. It's complicated, Mom. Amanda has a vision for the evening. Can you just trust her on this? For me. And so I had. Or I'd tried to. I'd written the deposit check, confirmed the menu, agreed to the seating arrangement that placed me at the opposite end of the table from Thomas. I'd bought the first edition. Books had them professionally wrapped and prepared to celebrate my son's 30th birthday in a way that felt increasingly foreign to the Thomas Bisp I had raised. The night before the dinner, I'd received a text from Amanda, wearing black tomorrow. Would prefer if you wore something colorful so we don't clash in photos. It was such a small thing, yet it perfectly encapsulated how Amanda viewed me as an accessory to be managed, not family, to be respected. I'd stared at the message for a long time before responding with a simple, okay. I'd worn blue. I'd done my hair the way Amanda had once mentioned looked most current. I'd arrived exactly on time, not early as I preferred. I'd done everything possible to avoid being the source of any tension. And still, it hadn't been enough. Still in front of everyone who mattered to Thomas, Amanda had found it necessary to put me in my place with 6 cutting words. You're completely useless in this situation. The morning after canceling Amanda's credit card, I sat in my kitchen with a fresh cup of coffee waiting. It wouldn't take long. Amanda typically went shopping on Saturday mornings, often to the high-end boutiques on Newberry Street. Sure enough, at 11:47 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Amanda. There's something wrong with my card. It was just declined. Call me. No, please. No question about whether there might be a legitimate issue. Just a demand. I didn't respond. If we were going to have this conversation, it wouldn't be on her terms, and it wouldn't be via text. 12 minutes later, my phone rang. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello, Amanda. My card was declined at Neiman Marcus, she said without preamble, her voice tight with controlled anger. It's embarrassing. What's going on? I've removed you as an authorized user on my account, I said, keeping my voice calm and matter of fact. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, you what? Why would you do that without telling me? I'm telling you now, I replied. The card was for emergencies, Amanda, not for regular shopping or lifestyle expenses. Is this because of what happened at dinner? She demanded. Are you really that petty? This isn't about pettiness, I said. It's about boundaries and respect, both of which have been lacking in our relationship. I can't believe this. Amanda's voice rose. After everything Thomas and I have done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Amanda? I interrupted, surprising myself with my directness. Because, from where I'm sitting, The support has gone entirely in one direction. We include you in our lives, she shot back. We invite you to things. We visit. We call. Do you have any idea how many of my friends have terrible relationships with their mothers-in-law? You should be grateful. The audacity of her statement momentarily took my breath away. She genuinely believed she was doing me a favor by allowing me to be part of my son's life. I think we have very different perspectives on our relationship, I said finally. But regardless, the decision about the credit card is final. Thomas will be furious when I tell him, she threatened. Is that what you want? To drive a wedge between you and your son? Thomas and I need to have a conversation. I agreed. But that should be between him and me. Good luck with that, Amanda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You've just guaranteed he won't be speaking to you anytime soon. Hope it was worth it. She hung up before I could respond. I set my phone down on the counter, my hand trembling slightly. The conversation had gone more or less as I'd expected, but the reality of confrontation was still jarring. For so long, I'd avoided direct conflict with Amanda, always choosing the path of least resistance to maintain peace. Would Thomas be angry? Probably. Would he take Amanda's side? Likely, at least initially. The thought of further damaging my relationship with my only child made my chest tighten with anxiety. But a small voice inside me kept whispering Robert's voice. You're doing the right thing, Linda. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. I called Catherine to update her on the situation. She actually said you should be grateful, Catherine repeated incredulously. The entitlement is unbelievable. She genuinely sees herself as the wronged party, I confirmed. And she's probably telling Thomas her version of events right now. Let her, Catherine said firmly. Eventually, the truth comes out. Just be ready when Thomas calls. But Thomas didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. By Monday morning, the silence from my son was becoming its own kind of statement. I tried to focus on work, reviewing financial projections for a startup I was consulting with, but my attention kept drifting to my silent phone. Should I call Thomas? Would that make things worse? Monday evening, I made a decision. I sent Thomas a simple text. I'd like to talk with you when you have time. Just you. It's important. The response came an hour later. About the credit card, Amanda told me what happened. I typed carefully. Yes, about that and other things. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Fine. Tomorrow after work. Your place. It wasn't warm, but it was a start. I replied with a simple thank you and began preparing mentally for what might be one of the most difficult conversations I'd ever have with my son. Tuesday evening arrived with a crisp autumn chill. I prepared Thomas's favorite meal, beef stew with fresh herbs from my garden, crusty bread, and apple pie for dessert. Not because I was trying to bribe him with nostalgia, but because I wanted this difficult conversation to happen in an atmosphere of care and familiarity. At precisely 6:30, Thomas's Audi, the one I'd bought them, pulled into my driveway. He sat in the car for nearly a full minute before getting out, his reluctance evident even from a distance. When he finally came to the door, his expression was guarded, his posture stiff. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Dinner's ready if you're hungry. I'm not here for a social visit, Mom, he said, though he followed me to the kitchen nonetheless. Amanda is really upset. She said you humiliated her at a store for no reason. I gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table, where I'd already set 2 places. I canceled a credit card that was being misused. The store incident was an unfortunate consequence, but hardly deliberate humiliation. Thomas remained standing, arms crossed. She uses that card for work-related expenses, things that help her career. Does her career require $1,200 handbags? I asked, quietly sliding my tablet across the table. Or $800 spa days? Because that's what the statements show. Thomas finally sat down, reluctantly taking the tablet. I served the stew while he scrolled through the credit card statements I'd prepared, his face gradually shifting from defiance to confusion. "This can't be right," he muttered. "Some of these charges, I didn't know about these. $30,000 in 6 months, Thomas. None of it discussed with me. None of it repaid. None of it actual emergencies, which was the card's intended purpose." He set the tablet down, his appetite apparently forgotten, despite the steaming bowl in front of him. "I knew we were using the card sometimes, but not like this. Amanda said it was just occasional work expenses. This goes beyond the card, Thomas," I said gently. "It's about a pattern of behavior that's been developing for years. The financial impositions are just the most tangible aspect." "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "I'm talking about how Amanda speaks to me, how she dismisses me, how she's gradually isolated you from the people who knew you before her, how she's established a dynamic where I'm expected to provide financial support while receiving disrespect in return." Thomas's face flushed. "That's not fair. Amanda has her own money, her own career. She's not with me for financial reasons." "I didn't say she was," I clarified. "But she does seem to view my resources as an extension of your household income. And she has no compunction about insulting me publicly, as she demonstrated at your birthday dinner." At the mention of the dinner, Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. "She shouldn't have said that," he admitted. "But she was stressed about making a good impression on my boss. You were asking questions about the promotion timeline that might have made me look bad." "I asked if you were excited about the possibility," I corrected. "That's hardly inappropriate conversation from your mother at your birthday dinner." "You don't understand the corporate politics," Thomas insisted. "Amanda is just trying to protect my career. By calling me useless, in what world is that helpful to your career?" Thomas pushed his bowl away untouched. "Look, Amanda can be intense sometimes. She has strong opinions, but she loves me, and she wants what's best for us." "I don't doubt she loves you," I said carefully. "But I wonder if what she thinks is best for you is actually what would make you happiest." "What's that supposed to mean?" I studied my son's face, the tension lines that hadn't been there a few years ago, the slight shadowing under his eyes. "When was the last time you saw Michael or Jason, or went fishing with your uncle, or did any of the things you used to enjoy before you met Amanda?" Thomas looked away. "People change. Priorities shift. That's normal in a marriage." "Yes, but typically those changes come from mutual growth, not one person shaping the other into something different." "You think Amanda is controlling me?" Thomas's voice took on a defensive edge again. "I'm not some puppet mom. I make my own decisions, including the decision to let her speak to your mother that way, to spend money that isn't hers, with no accountability, to cut you off from lifelong friends because they don't fit her image." Thomas stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. Amanda was right. You're just jealous because I've built a life that doesn't revolve around you." The accusation stung, but I kept my voice steady. "If that's what you truly believe, then I've failed as a mother. Because the last thing I ever wanted was for your life to revolve around me. I want you to be happy, Thomas. Genuinely happy, not just appearing successful to impress others." Something in my words seemed to penetrate his anger. He remained standing, but his posture softened slightly. "I am happy," he said, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. "Are you?" I asked gently. "Because lately you seem stressed, anxious, walking on eggshells. That's not the Thomas I know." He sank back into his chair, suddenly, looking exhausted. "It's just work pressure. The promotion has been dangling for months. And the credit card charges, the ones you didn't know about." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that my heart ached. "I'll talk to Amanda about that. There must be a misunderstanding." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Thomas, I love you. I want to support you and your marriage. But that support can't include enabling behaviors that are ultimately harmful to you, to me, or to our relationship." "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying the blank check era is over, financially and emotionally. I'll always be here for true emergencies and reasonable support. But the credit card won't be reinstated. The open-ended loans won't continue. And I won't accept disrespect as the price of admission to your life." Thomas withdrew his hand, but his expression was more thoughtful than angry now. "Amanda's not going to like this." "Probably not," I agreed. "But this isn't about punishing Amanda. It's about establishing the healthy boundaries that should have been in place from the beginning. My failure, as much as anyone's." We sat in silence for a moment, the untouched stew cooling between us. Finally, Thomas spoke. "I should go. Amanda's waiting to hear what happened." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment that he hadn't eaten, hadn't fully engaged with what I was trying to tell him. "Will you think about what I've said? Really think about it." Thomas stood and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused. "The books," he said suddenly. "The first editions you gave me for my birthday. Amanda wanted to return them, to get store credit somewhere else. I told her no. They're in my office at work, where they're safe." It was a small thing, but it felt significant. A tiny rebellion, a moment of the real Thomas asserting himself. "Thank you for telling me that," I said quietly. After he left, I cleared the untouched dinner and sat alone in my kitchen. Had I done the right thing? Had I pushed too hard or not hard enough? Would this be the beginning of healing or the final break in our already strained relationship? Only time would tell. But for the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth without filtering it through fear of Amanda's reaction or Thomas's rejection. It felt terrifying and liberating all at once. I picked up my phone and called Catherine. "Well," she answered immediately. "How did it go?" "I honestly don't know," I admitted. "But whatever happens next, at least I won't have the regret of having said nothing." 2 days after my confrontation with Thomas, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I'd been in the garden, cutting the last of the season's roses, and wasn't expecting visitors. When I opened the door, Thomas stood there, looking haggard. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough, as if he'd been arguing or hadn't slept. "Of course." I stepped aside, alarmed by his appearance. "What's happened?" Thomas moved past me into the living room and sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "You were right," he said finally. "About everything." I sat beside him, waiting, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "After I left here, I confronted Amanda about the credit card charges. I showed her the statement, asked her to explain." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "She said I was choosing you over her, that I was betraying her by questioning her. When I pressed about the specific purchases, she just exploded. Said I was too weak to build the life we deserved, so she had to do it for us." My heart ached for him, but I remained silent, knowing he needed to process this in his own way. Then she started listing all the things she'd given up to be with me. as if being my wife was some huge sacrifice, as if I was lucky she had settled for me. His voice cracked. Maybe I was. No, I said firmly, breaking my silence. That's her insecurity, talking not reality. You are a kind, intelligent man with so much to offer. Anyone would be fortunate to share your life. Thomas gave a hollow laugh. That's not how Amanda sees it. According to her, I'm socially clueless, professionally stagnant, and embarrassingly attached to my mother. And how do you see yourself? I asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment. I don't know anymore. For the past 3 years, I've been seeing myself through Amanda's eyes, trying to be the person she thought I should be. And somehow, in the process, I lost track of who I actually am. The admission hung in the air between us, raw and painful, but also potentially healing. What happened after the argument? I prompted gently. She left, Thomas said, packed a bag, said she needed space, and went to stay with her friend Megan. On her way out, she told me that if I wanted our marriage to continue, I needed to get you to reinstate her card and stop interfering in our lives. He looked at me directly. She wants me to cut you off completely if you don't comply. I absorbed this ultimatum, trying to keep my expression neutral. And what do you want, Thomas? I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to fix this, to do whatever it takes to make her come home. We've built a life together. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together. That's not nothing. No, it's not, I agreed. But is it a life that makes you happy, that allows you to be your authentic self? Thomas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where he had played as a child. I went to see David yesterday, he said, referring to his best friend from college, one of the few pre-Amanda friends he still occasionally saw. I told him what was happening. What did he say? He said he's been worried about me for years, that I've changed and not for the better, that Amanda, Thomas paused, that Amanda has traits that remind him of his mother, who has narcissistic personality disorder. I watched my son, carefully seeing the conflict play across his face. That's a serious comparison, I said neutrally. I know, and maybe it's an exaggeration. But when he started listing the patterns, controlling who I see, isolating me from family, making me feel constantly inadequate, taking financial advantage, it all sounded familiar. Thomas turned back to me. Then he asked me a question I couldn't answer. When was the last time I felt truly happy? Not just temporarily pleased with some achievement or purchase, but deeply, contentedly happy. And I prompted when he fell silent. I couldn't remember, Thomas said simply. Isn't that awful? I'm 30 years old, financially stable, married with a good career. I should be happy. But I can't remember the last time I felt that way. My heart broke for him. This brilliant, kind young man, who had somehow lost his way, who had allowed someone else's vision to override his own inner compass. What else did David say? I asked. He suggested I talk to someone professional. He gave me the name of the therapist who helped his mother. Thomas sat back down beside me. Do you think I need therapy? I chose my words carefully. I think everyone can benefit from talking to a professional during difficult times. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're brave enough to seek perspective. Thomas nodded slowly. Amanda will see it as a betrayal. More evidence that I'm weak. Is that how you see it? No, he said, surprising me with his firmness. I think it takes strength to ask for help. Dad always said that. The mention of Robert brought tears to my eyes. He did, and he was right. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, both lost in our thoughts. Finally, Thomas spoke again. "There's more," he said hesitantly. "After I met with David, I got curious about our finances. Amanda has always handled them. She said since she works in marketing, she understands money better." He gave a self-deprecating laugh, which is ridiculous when you think about it. "I'm a software engineer. I literally work with numbers all day." A knot of dread formed in my stomach. "What did you find?" "Credit card debt. A lot of it." Thomas looked down at his hands. "Over 40,000 across 3 cards I didn't even know we had. All maxed out. All with astronomical interest rates." "Oh, Thomas," I breathed. "There's more," he continued. "We're 3 months behind on the condo association fees. The property taxes are past due. And there's a personal loan from one of those predatory online lenders." He shook his head in disbelief. "We make good money, Mom. Combined, we bring in over $150,000 a year. How are we this financially wrecked?" It was the question I'd been silently asking myself for months, watching their lifestyle outpace what I knew of their income. "I don't know, but I'm glad you're finally looking into it." "I feel like such a fool," Thomas said bitterly. "All those times Amanda said she handled something, or that I didn't need to worry about the details. All those times she made me feel financially naive for questioning a purchase. Financial deception is surprisingly common in relationships," I told him. "It's nothing to be ashamed of. What matters is that you've discovered it and can now address it." "How?" Thomas looked utterly lost. "How do I even begin to fix this mess?" "One step at a time," I said. "First you get a complete picture of the situation. Then you make a plan, and you decide if this is a challenge you want to face with Amanda or on your own." "You think we might not make it," Thomas said. It wasn't a question. "I think that's a decision only you can make based on what you discover and what Amanda is willing to acknowledge," I replied carefully. "Financial infidelity, like any infidelity, can be overcome, but only with complete honesty and a genuine commitment to change." Thomas's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it and his face tightened. "It's Amanda. She wants to know if I've handled you yet." He put the phone away without responding. "She texts every few hours with the same question, as if you're a problem to be managed." "What are you going to tell her?" I asked. "I don't know yet," Thomas admitted. "Part of me wants to confront her with everything I've learned. Part of me is afraid of what will happen if I do." "You don't have to decide everything tonight," I reminded him. "Give yourself time to process." Thomas nodded, then asked hesitantly, "Would it be okay if I stayed here tonight? I haven't been sleeping well at the condo. Too many thoughts spinning in my head." "Of course," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "Your room is always ready for you." Later, after Thomas had gone upstairs to the bedroom he'd grown up in, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, thinking about the day's revelations. The situation was worse than I'd imagined, but Thomas's eyes were finally opening to the reality of his marriage. I wouldn't push him toward any particular decision. This was his life, his choice. But I would be there offering support, without enabling love, without conditions, guidance, without control. As I was heading to bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, despite him being just upstairs. "Thank you for not saying, 'I told you so.' And thank you for giving me a safe place to land." I texted back, "Always." Then I added, "Your father would be proud of your courage today." It was a small beginning, a fragile seedling of the authentic Thomas reemerging. Whether it would grow strong enough to withstand the storms ahead remained to be seen. The next week unfolded with a speed and intensity that left me struggling to keep up. Thomas went from staying just one night at my house to effectively moving back in, at least temporarily. He contacted the therapist David had recommended and scheduled an appointment. And most significantly, he began the painstaking process of untangling his financial situation. What he discovered was even worse than the initial revelation. Beyond the credit card debt and missed payments, Amanda had taken out a second mortgage on their condo without his knowledge, using a power of attorney he'd signed when they first bought the property. She had also opened store credit accounts in his name at several high-end retailers. "How did I not see the statements, the bills?" Thomas asked, as we sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by financial documents he'd gathered from their condo while Amanda was at work. "Did Amanda handle all the mail?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "She said it was more efficient if one person managed it, and I have all my regular bills on autopay, so I never thought to check." It was a perfect storm. Thomas's trusting nature, Amanda's financial deception, and the ease with which modern banking allowed transactions to happen invisibly. By Thomas's calculations, they were over $100,000 in debt, with minimum monthly payments that nearly equaled their combined take-home pay. "I can help you," I offered. "Not to pay it all off, that wouldn't be healthy, but to consolidate the high-interest debt into something manageable." Thomas shook his head firmly. "No, Mom. I got myself into this by abdicating responsibility. I need to get myself out the same way, by taking responsibility." I felt a surge of pride at his resolve. That's a mature perspective. But don't confuse taking responsibility with punishing yourself. Accepting reasonable help isn't the same as the enabling pattern we fell into before. Thomas considered this. "Maybe a loan for the highest interest cards," he conceded, "with a formal repayment plan and interest, like a real bank would do." "That seems reasonable," I agreed. Meanwhile, Amanda had shifted tactics from angry demands to tearful pleas. Thomas showed me the text messages that arrived with increasing frequency. "I miss you. Please come home so we can work this out. I'm sorry if I hurt you. We can fix this together. I'm so alone right now. Don't you care about what I'm going through? Your mother has always tried to come between us. Don't let her win." Thomas struggled with each message, his resolve wavering, then strengthening in cycles. The therapist he was seeing helped him recognize these messages for what they were: manipulation tactics designed to make him doubt his own perceptions. 10 days after Thomas had come to my door, Amanda finally showed up herself. I was in the garden when her car pulled into the driveway. Thomas was at work, and I briefly considered not answering the door, but decided that avoidance would only escalate the situation. Amanda had clearly dressed for the confrontation, wearing an expensive-looking suit that projected confidence and success. But her usual perfect grooming showed subtle signs of strain. Her hair not quite as immaculate, her makeup slightly heavier, as if concealing tired eyes. "Is Thomas here?" she demanded when I opened the door. "He's at work," I replied calmly. "Can I help you with something?" "You can help by staying out of our marriage," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Whatever you've been telling him, it's working. He's barely speaking to me. He's missing meetings with our friends. He's seeing a therapist, for God's sake." "Those are all Thomas's choices," I pointed out. "Adult choices that he has every right to make." "We both know you're influencing him," Amanda countered. "You've never accepted me. Never thought I was good enough for your precious son." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm and not get drawn into her narrative. "That's not true, Amanda. I welcomed you into our family. I've been generous with both financial and emotional support. What I haven't accepted is disrespect and financial exploitation." "Exploitation," Amanda's voice rose. "I've elevated Thomas's entire life. When I met him, he was wearing off-the-rack suits and living in a starter apartment. Look at him now. Yes, look at him now, I agreed. In debt, stressed, isolated, from friends, and questioning his own judgment. That's not elevation, Amanda. That's erasure. Her face flushed with anger. You don't understand anything about modern relationships, about ambition, about building a life that people envy. Is that what marriage means to you? Creating a life for others to envy, rather than one that brings you genuine joy. Joy doesn't pay for designer wardrobes or get you invited to the right social circles, Amanda shot back. And those things are more important to you than Thomas's well-being, I asked quietly. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Amanda's perfect features. Then her expression hardened again. Thomas's well-being is exactly what I'm concerned about. He needs me. He's floundering without me. Just ask his boss about the presentation he completely botched last week. The comment struck me as odd. How would you know about his work performance? I thought you weren't communicating. Amanda's eyes shifted away briefly. People talk. We have mutual connections at his company. The implication that she was gathering information about Thomas through workplace channels sent a chill through me. Was she trying to undermine him professionally now? I think you should leave Amanda, I said firmly. Thomas will contact you when he's ready. Pushing him will only delay that process. This isn't over, Amanda said, turning to go. At the door, she paused. Tell Thomas I'll be at the condo tonight. If he cares about saving our marriage, he'll be there too. After she left, I immediately called Thomas to warn him about the encounter. She came here, he asked, sounding alarmed. What did she want? I relayed the conversation as accurately as I could, including Amanda's comment about his work presentation. There was no botched presentation, Thomas said slowly, but my boss has been acting strangely toward me this week. More critical, less supportive. Do you think Amanda might be saying things to undermine you at work? I asked hesitantly. She's friends with my boss's wife, Thomas said. They take the same Pilates class. He sighed heavily. I wouldn't have thought she'd go that far. But a week ago, I wouldn't have thought she'd hide a second mortgage either. That evening, Thomas decided to meet Amanda at their condo, but insisted on doing so with a clear exit strategy. I'll take my own car, he told me. I'll set a 2-hour time limit for the discussion, and I'll have David on standby to call me with an emergency if things get too intense. I hugged him before he left. Trust your instincts, I advised. You know the difference between productive discussion and manipulation. When Thomas returned 4 hours later, his expression was grim but resolute. She denied everything, he said, dropping onto the couch. The second mortgage, the store accounts, even the basic credit card debt. Said I was making things up to justify abandoning her. Even with the documentation, I asked, incredulous. She said the paperwork was misleading, that I didn't understand how finances work. Thomas gave a hollow laugh. Then she switched tactics, started crying, saying she'd made some mistakes, but only because she loved me so much and wanted us to have the best of everything. And how did that make you feel? A week ago, it would have worked, Thomas admitted. I would have comforted her, promised to fix things, taken all the blame. But tonight, I just felt tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of never being enough. Tired of walking on eggshells in my own home. What did you tell her? I asked gently. That I need time and space. That I'm not making any permanent decisions yet, but I'm also not coming home right now. He rubbed his eyes wearily. Then she gave me an ultimatum. Either I come home by the end of the week and we put this nonsense behind us, or she'll consider our marriage over. That's a heavy threat, I observed. It is, Thomas agreed. But for the first time, it didn't feel like the worst thing that could happen. The rest of the week passed in a strange limbo. Thomas went to work, attended therapy, and continued organizing his finances. Amanda alternated between angry texts, tearful voicemails, and occasional moments of apparent self-reflection. "I think she's beginning to realize I'm serious," Thomas told me after one particularly vulnerable message from Amanda. She actually acknowledged some specific behaviors and apologized for them. "That sounds like progress," I said cautiously. "Maybe." Thomas didn't sound convinced. "The therapist says people can change if they genuinely want to and are willing to do the hard work. The question is whether Amanda wants to change for herself or just to keep me from leaving." By Friday, Amanda's deadline, Thomas had made his decision. He would meet with her again, but not to move back home. Instead, he wanted to propose a trial separation with specific conditions: financial transparency, marriage counseling, and a clear understanding that both reconciliation and divorce remained possibilities. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, as he prepared to leave for the meeting. "A trial separation is usually a step toward divorce." "I'm not sure about anything," Thomas admitted, "except that I can't go back to the way things were. If there's any chance for us, it has to be on completely different terms." Thomas left for the meeting with a resolve I hadn't seen in him since before his marriage. Whatever happened next, I knew he was finally making choices based on his own values, not someone else's expectations. 3 hours later, he returned. One look at his face told me everything I needed to know. "She refused the separation terms," I guessed. "She never gave them a chance," Thomas said, his voice hollow. When I arrived, there were suitcases by the door. "Not mine, hers. She's moving to Chicago. Accepted a job offer there last week, apparently. Was going to tell me after I came to my senses and moved back home." I stared at him speechless. "The ultimatum was a bluff," Thomas continued, sinking into a chair. "She never expected me to hold firm. When I did, she had to either follow through on her threat or lose face. So she's leaving. Said I can have the condo and the debt that goes with it." "Thomas, I'm so sorry," I said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "The strangest part." Thomas looked at me, his eyes dry but pained. "I feel relieved. What does that say about our marriage, about me?" "It says you've been carrying a burden you didn't even recognize until it started to lift," I told him. "It says you're finally listening to your own heart instead of someone else's demands." 3 years, Thomas said softly. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together. And she can just leave, take a job in another city without even discussing it with me. Who does that? Someone who always saw the relationship primarily in terms of what it provided for her, I suggested gently. Thomas nodded slowly. The therapist said something similar, that in Amanda's worldview, relationships are transactional. When the transaction no longer favors her, she moves on. We sat in silence for a while, Thomas processing the abrupt end of his marriage, me trying to provide quiet support without overwhelming him with my own opinions. Finally, he spoke again. "I don't know what happens next, Mom. I'm 30 years old soon, to be divorced, with a mountain of debt and a condo I can't really afford on my own. This wasn't how I pictured my life." "Few of us end up exactly where we pictured," I said. "But that doesn't mean the new path can't lead somewhere wonderful." Thomas gave me a small, sad smile. "Always the optimist." "A realist," I corrected, "who has lived long enough to know that endings often make space for new, better beginnings." 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated. on that painful night when Amanda delivered her parting blow. The initial shock and grief of Thomas's marriage ending had given way to a period of intense personal growth and unexpected new directions. Thomas had sold the condo, using the proceeds to pay off the second mortgage and some of the credit card debt. He'd moved into a modest apartment closer to his work, furnished simply but comfortably. The financial hole remained deep, but with careful budgeting and a disciplined repayment plan, he was making progress. More importantly, he was rediscovering himself. He'd reconnected with old friends, joined a hiking club, and even started playing guitar, again something he'd loved in college, but had abandoned when Amanda deemed it an unprofitable hobby. "I feel like I'm waking up from a long, strange dream," he told me over dinner one Sunday evening, a tradition we'd reinstated. Looking back, I barely recognized myself during those years with Amanda. "Relationships can change us," I observed. "Sometimes for better, sometimes not. This one changed me for the worse," Thomas admitted. "But I'm responsible for allowing that to happen, for ignoring the red flags, for silencing my own instincts." His self-awareness had grown tremendously through continued therapy. He no longer blamed Amanda exclusively for the relationship's dysfunction, recognizing his own role in enabling the unhealthy patterns. Yet he also no longer shouldered all the blame, as he had in the marriage's early days, when any conflict was automatically his fault, at least according to Amanda. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed. Amanda, eager to start fresh in Chicago, had agreed to a clean break with minimal demands. Her parting words to Thomas, delivered via text, had been telling, "You'll regret choosing your mother over me. Enjoy your small, insignificant life." Thomas had shown me the message, then deleted it with a shrug. "3 months ago, that would have devastated me," he'd said. "Now it just confirms I made the right decision." As for me, I had been making changes too. With Thomas finding his independence again, I'd turned attention to aspects of my own life I'd neglected. I joined a book club, took a watercolor class, and even at Catherine's insistence, created a profile on a dating site for seniors. "You're only 58, Catherine had argued. "That's practically young these days. Robert would want you to be happy, not alone." I'd resisted initially, but eventually agreed to at least open myself to the possibility of companionship. To my surprise, I'd met Richard, a 60-year-old widower who taught engineering at Boston University. Our first coffee date had turned into dinner, which had led to regular outings over the past 2 months. Richard was kind, intelligent, and refreshingly straightforward. He understood grief, having lost his wife to multiple sclerosis 4 years earlier. He had adult children of his own and respected family boundaries in a way that felt healthy and balanced. "Thomas seems like a remarkable young man," Richard had commented after meeting my son for the first time. "He's been through a difficult experience, but there's a depth to him now that only comes from facing real challenges." I'd been touched by his perception. Yes, exactly. He's stronger now, more authentic. The most significant healing, though, had come in my relationship with Thomas. The artificial barriers Amanda had erected between us had fallen away, replaced by a more mature, mutually respectful connection. Thomas no longer saw my advice as interference or my boundaries as rejection. I no longer felt compelled to buy his affection or suppress my concerns to keep the peace. "I wish Dad could see how things have turned out," Thomas said one evening as we finished dinner on my back porch, the spring air mild and fragrant with blooming flowers. "I think he can," I said simply, "and I think he's proud of you. Not because everything went smoothly. That's never the measure of a life well lived. but because when faced with difficult truths, you had the courage to acknowledge them and the strength to act. Thomas nodded, contemplative. You know what I realized recently? Amanda always talked about appearance, about how things looked to others. But Dad was always concerned with substance, with what was true and right, regardless of appearance. That was Robert. I agreed, smiling at the memory. Substance over style, every time. I want to be more like him, Thomas said. Less concerned with impressing others, more focused on living with integrity. You're already well on your way, I assured him. After Thomas left that evening, I sat alone on the porch, reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the humiliation at that birthday dinner to the quiet strength I'd found in establishing boundaries. From Thomas's confusion and pain to his emerging authenticity and resilience. The credit card incident had been a turning point, a small act of self-respect that had catalyzed larger changes. By refusing to continue enabling Amanda's disrespect, I'd not only honored myself, but ultimately helped Thomas recognize the unhealthy patterns in his marriage. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries. Sometimes, the most caring thing we can do is say no. And sometimes, the most valuable gift we can offer those we love is the truth, even when that truth is difficult to hear. As for Amanda, I felt no animosity toward her, only a quiet sadness. Her need for validation through external trappings, her focus on appearance over substance, had cost her a relationship with a truly good man. Perhaps someday she would recognize that loss and grow from it. Perhaps not. Either way, it was no longer our burden to bear. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? Did it change your relationship for better or worse? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if my story has resonated with you in any way, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Your support means so much as I continue sharing these life lessons that sometimes take us decades to learn. Thank you for being here with me today. And remember that true respect, both for yourself and others, is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today.